having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 2083. We're getting up there in numbers, and today's topic is living legacy. What are you passing on? Yes, and our questions for you today are, what are you passing on right now, intentionally or not? And what's one thing you want to be remembered for this year? So let's have a look at this. I love these topics. So legacy isn't just about what happens after you're gone. It's what people feel when you are in the room. It's not about making money or fame. It's your words, your ways, your warmth, or your wit. For example, my grandma, you could say that your grandmother never had a formal education, but every time I folded a fitted sheet, I hear her voice guiding me through the corners. For me personally, every time I'm in the kitchen and I'm cooking and I take out the eggs, I remember the lessons my grandmother gave me on how to crack the two together and open them and drop them in the bowl to crack two together at once. I loved being in the kitchen with my grandma. We made some great stuff in there and got taught great lessons because she was a professional chef when she was in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. That was her job. And so I learned a lot from her. So whenever I'm in the kitchen, I always hear her voice reminding me how to hold the eggs, how to crack them, how to split them open. So you got an egg in each hand. So you're doing two at once. I always remember that. So that's something that she has left as a living legacy because she was alive at the time telling me that. Yet even though she's been gone for a number of years, I'm still hearing her voice in my head telling me how to do this and how to do that. My Nana on the other side, every time if I go and make something like fudge, I crack up laughing every time because there is a fudge story that many years ago, we were in the kitchen and making fudge, and she was giving us the instructions. And what got left out, she gave us the recipe, and we had to follow the recipe. But what we didn't do is we forgot to put the eggs into the fudge. This was fudge that had eggs in the recipe. And she says, did you put the egg in? Because she's coming over and going, it's not looking right. And so she goes down, did you put the eggs? Oh, no, we forgot to put the eggs in. So we just broke the eggs open and put them straight into the pot with the hot fudge. We did not beat them beforehand. We just cracked open the eggs and popped them into the fudge and started mixing them in. And she says, you were supposed to beat them before you put them in there. So every time now when I make fudge, I think of that fudge story. And my great uncle Ollie was visiting, and after we'd made the fudge and it had cooled and set and all that, he happened to be visiting that afternoon because that's why we were making the fudge anyway, because Uncle Ollie was coming. And so my Nana tells him about the story about us making the fudge and forgetting the eggs and just putting the eggs in whole and not beating them first before putting them in. And he very dutifully, if you want to put it that way, very politely takes a piece of fudge and tries it. And he sits there and he chews on it, and all of a sudden he goes, oh, I think I broke a tooth. And we're like, oh no, did the egg harden up in there? So we were panicking for a little bit, and then he just comes up with a big smile and all that sort of stuff. So a very funny incident over fudge. So yes, there are things that they are memories that you create, but they are also stuff that has been passed on to you from the older generation that has been passed on to you, so that when they're no longer here, you still have those traditions. What have you inherited that you're carrying forward? Is it core beliefs? Is it habits, humor, fears, love languages, family traditions, meals, mantras, the way you show up? Like we have, most people, when they get married, advice they get given is never go to bed angry. Always say I love you before you go to bed. Always have I love you be the first thing and the last thing they hear every morning and evening before you go to bed and when you wake up and before they leave the house, and the first thing they hear when they get home. And we were told that the bedroom is a place of love and calm and peacefulness. If you are angry, do not take it into the bedroom. Take it somewhere else. Sort it out, then you go to bed. And that's what I've been taught. And the bedroom is not the place for arguments. It is not the place for anger. It is the place for peace, calm, and love. And so that's another thing that's been passed down to me. So are you passing these on intentionally, or are they passing themselves? Now, when you're passing intentionally, you are instructing the younger generations about different traditions, habits, fears, and all that. Some of them they will pick up naturally from watching you. You have to be very careful with kids in certain age areas, especially when they're learning to talk, about what you say, because they may pick it up. And there is a lot of, I ever tell you this, there's a lot of TikTok videos out there or reels out there where you've got kids that are being videotaped about different, being asked questions and all of that, or they're just, for whatever reason, videotaping the kids. And the stuff that's coming out of some of those kids' mouths, I'm like, oh my gosh, I would be on that in an instant telling them that that is not appropriate. But people think it's funny and all that sort of stuff. And but some of the funniest ones I see is like there was a grandmother who was walking along and she's hunched over. You know, she's old, she's hunched over, she's on a walking stick and got her hand on her back. And behind her comes her granddaughter, hunched over, like she's got a stick in one hand and got her back on, and she's walking exactly like a grandmother. It was hilarious. So you know, they watch, they pay attention, they learn from what you do and what you say. So your legacy right now, what do people say about you? What do you hope they say? How do you feel? How do you make people feel encouraged, safe, empowered, unseen? Think about it. Sometimes you don't realize how much other people notice about you until they tell you. I had one of my nieces told me, I didn't realize, you know, I just trying to think how to put this. I didn't realize how much I modeled resilience until my niece told me that I was her calm person. And that still chokes me up when I think about that I'm her calm person. And then these nieces have seen me in high stress situations where other people have lost it. And I'm just there as the calm person saying, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. You know, giving them tasks to do just to keep them busy so that they can't concentrate on what the trauma is that's going on at that time. And I don't know what it is, but when anything traumatic happens, I go into this place of calmness and clear thinking. Like when Zeffie had her first seizure, I just didn't panic. I just immediately dropped to my knees with her and just started talking to her and stroking her and calming her down and timing how long the seizure was from that moment. And then afterwards, as she's coming out of it, this is the funny. It's not funny, but it was funny. It wasn't funny at the time, but it was funny later when I look back at it. Every time I mentioned to her, okay, I need to go and get my phone so I can call the vet, an emergency vet to take you to, she would literally start shaking again, like she was about to have another seizure. I think it's that vet word that she didn't like. But, you know, when things happen, I tend to calm down a little bit. My mother-in-law passed out in the middle of a restaurant. People were panicking. The family was panicking. I just calmly gave them tasks to do and told them what to do and asked somebody to call 911 and sent the nieces and nephews off to do things and gave my brother-in-law a task to do and all of that sort of stuff while I stayed calm and there. When Brad passed out on a plane, I was completely calm. He passed out on a plane. He told me he wasn't feeling well. I called the steward over. Their flight steward, they came and brought him oxygen. He's on the oxygen. The flight steward comes back 15 minutes later. We check with Brad. He's passed out. So I looked at him and says, we might need to find if there's a doctor on board because he's out cold. And the steward looks at me and goes, okay. So I went up the front. They made, is there any medical personnel on board? And there happened to be an ICU nurse on board up in first class. They came back. They took the two guys. I don't know where they put the two guys that were sitting in the row in front of us, but they took them somewhere. We're in economy. We're on 3 seats, and Brad's at the window. I'm on the aisle. And so the nurse, they bring out the suitcase and open up the suitcase, and it's full of, and I'm like, well, this is pretty cool. You know, my husband's passed out over here, and I'm looking at the suitcase going, well, this is pretty cool. It's got everything in there. So they pull out the defibrillator and patch them all up with that. My job was to watch the W's and make sure they didn't turn into M's, and the thing's going like this. And I'm like, well, what's a W and what's an M? But I realized what the nurse was doing. He was giving me something to do so I wouldn't freak out on him. I didn't freak out till 2 o'clock that afternoon. I had just been dealing with my mother-in-law who passed out in a restaurant. We had finally got her over. She refused to go with paramedics. So we called my brother-in-law, who was, his wife was in charge of basically all of her medical stuff, and said, get her to this particular hospital here into the ER. We will meet you there. And so we then had to drive from where we were on one side of the one side of LA all the way across into the valley, up towards the northern end of the valley, take her to that hospital. We're in the ER with her. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law arrived. My sister-in-law went in and talked to medical staff to get all of her medical information to them and everything else. And they had her all hooked up on stuff and everything. And then we had to, after about an hour and a half, we had to leave to go to LAX. So we had to drive all the way back across through the valley into the other side of LA. Because where we originally were, we were close to LAX. So we had to drive all the way back over there. I think, we drove through like McDonald's on the way because we hadn't had any lunch. We were sitting down in a restaurant to have lunch when this happened. And so by this time it's like 7:00 at night. Our plane leaves at like 9:00 and all this sort of stuff. So we get to the airport, we get checked in, return the rental car, get to the airport, check in, get on the plane. And we're like, I don't know, 2 hours into our flight back to DC. And Brad turns around and says, I don't feel well. And so we got the oxygen on him. He passes out. We find the nurse. And thankfully, the nurse was on board the plane, because what happened, if there was no medical people on board, we would have been diverted to the closest airport. And Brad and I would have been removed from the plane and taken off. And then the plane would have carried on to DC. Thankfully, there was a medical person on board the plane. And so they basically, the pilots and that called ahead. They got the update from the ICU nurse. They called ahead to Washington Dulles International Airport, explained the medical emergency on board, and were given clearance. They basically pushed other flights out of the way. Were given clearance to come in hard and fast. Come in, go a little faster than what they were doing and come straight on in. They held the pattern and everything, and they kept updating as we got closer. They started holding people in other planes in pattern until we were landed. We were already on target to come in like 30 to 40 minutes early than our flight. We got in an hour and a half before we were due in. And then we were the first people removed off, and Brad was adamant that he was not going to go on a wheelchair off the plane. He was going to walk. And so the crew helped us with our carry-on bags. They carried the bags for us. Brad got up. The ICU nurse walked him to the door where he got handed over to the paramedics. The nurse gave him the written report that had everything on there that they needed to know, handed off the information, gave him the verbal stuff as well. They then took Brad down the steps to the ambulance. I picked up our bags and followed him down, and I'm sitting in the front of the ambulance. Remember this? I'm sitting in front of the ambulance. My footwell has no room because that's where our carry-on bags are. We only had like 2 or 3 bags with us. And I'm looking, and here's a center console that's got all these buttons and dials and knobs and everything else. And I went, ooh, buttons. And Brad's this voice from the back comes, don't you dare touch those buttons, Helen, or those knobs or those dials. And he says to the paramedics, he says, you got to watch her with buttons and knobs and dials, because she'll flip switches and turn buttons and all that. And I'm like, I'm just looking. I'm sitting on my hands. I'm just looking. So, that's me in a calm situation. That's me in an emergency situation, completely calm. Even when Brad was in hospital and, going to the emergency room and stuff with him, all the times we had to do the emergency room stuff, and I'm completely calm. I was able to give the doctors and all of that, all the information that they needed whenever we took Brad in there. I was able to keep records and all of that sort of stuff so that I could tell the doctors and everything else what had happened to bring us to the ER. Brad would give their version, then I would tell them what actually happened. And yes, it did get that way. So, in a calm situation, in an emergency situation, I stay calm. Sometimes I have no clue what I'm supposed to be doing, but I stay calm. Anyway, I'm totally off point here right now. Okay, so back to the legacy thing. So if anybody's around me in a traumatic situation, I will be the calm one. It's later on that I realize I guess it's like the adrenaline kicks in or whatever, but when that stops, that's when I crash, and that's when I realize, oh my God, we almost lost Brett, because and that's when I start losing it. But it's not until everybody's safe. Once everybody's safe and I'm by myself and I'm able to calm down again, well, I lose the adrenaline rush, that's when I crash. Building a living legacy on purpose. It's never too late to pivot or to begin. What story are you telling by how you show up for others right now? Legacy starts with the way you speak when you are tired, the consistency of your kindness, and the way you tell your stories. My living legacy is showing up, having laughter, a bit of sass, and letting people know that they matter. That's me. So your question for this evening is, want you to reflect on this one. What are you passing on right now, intentionally or not? How are you in front of other people? What's one thing you want to be remembered for this year? So if we get to the end of the year, December 31st, we're going to say, what's one thing that you got remembered for this year? What do people remember about you from this year? So remember, you are a living legacy. Look at, explore your values, your habits, your stories that you're already sharing, and can you change anything to live more intentionally starting today? With that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hei konera.